If you were told tomorrow that you only have a certain amount of breaths to breathe, you would start to count your breaths. You would get worried. And it would become this thing that all of a sudden was focused on scarcity. You would take that deep breath and you would go, oh my gosh, one less, another one. And so you would start to slow down your breathing rate. And now you would start to look at what you have. And money works the same way. We have been disillusioned through our upbringing, through our environments, to believe that, well, money is lack. And that's usually represented through our childhood. We inherit the majority of our belief systems around money. And today is going to be an opportunity for you to really ask yourself, what was the conversation around money in your life, in your home, in your upbringing? What is it that you still feel today? Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to one belief that you have the power within to create everything you seek. So if you are ready to step into a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with me. I'm your host, Rudi Riekstins, and this is the InPowered Life. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast. I'm your host, Rudi Riekstins, and today I'm going to be triggering so many people with today's conversation, and that is around money. You see, when we talk about money, all of a sudden, we start to feel a certain way inside of our bodies. And as I talk to you about your money and how much money is in your bank account and your worthiness in receiving more money, it's going to trigger you, and it is intentional. I want that at the end of today's episode, you're going to take a very powerful, committed step towards opening yourself up to receiving so much abundance, because I want to remind you that you are a benevolent being connected to the divinity that is connected to everything. And the amount of money that you have in your life right now, the amount of money you have in your bank account right now, the amount of opportunity that you have around you that is bringing this money to you is based on your worthiness to receive. And I'm going to tell you now, you are already worthy. And so if you are worthy and you are benevolent and you are connected to the abundance of all things that are great in the universe, then why do we not all have money? And I want to really ground today's episode for you, because this is going to be just an incredible deep dive into not just me, but you. At the end of the day, the entire InPowered Life podcast has been designed to show you who you are. More specifically, to hold up a mirror back to you so you can reflect what is the relationship that you have for yourself. So often people reach out to me and they say, Rudi, I want to work with you. I want to take your programs. I want you to come into my company. I want you to coach my executive team. I want you to coach me as the leader of an organization. And when I get down to what it is that they are most wanting to achieve, the first initial response that I get from them is they want to make more money. Well, people think that that's what it is that they're hiring me for, and that's very rarely the case. But I want to focus in for a moment on money, because money seems to be the thing that makes the world go round. And yet it's also one of those things that seems to evade us the most in life. And I'm speaking now to the general population, because statistically speaking, and I've actually pulled up some numbers, and I'll read back to you now, less than 0.22% of Americans, less than 0.22%, so 20% of 1% of Americans make more than $1 million a year. Less than 0.77%, so 0.75% of Americans make more than $500,000 a year. And only 17.25% of Americans make between $75,000 and $100,000 a year. And so if we think the large majority of people, significant number of people, we're talking over 50% of people in America earn less than $75,000 a year. There was a poll that had been done that said that Americans, if they were presented with a $2,000 bill that was not planned, like a surprise, how many of them could actually pay for that without resorting to going to a credit card? And only 46% of Americans said they could deal with the $2,000 expense. But the minute the $2,000 expense went up, that number dropped dramatically. And so if we have 80, 90% of Americans living well below the $150,000 income mark, then why does it seem like money is so hard to make? I started today's episode saying we're benevolent beings connected to the divinity of God. We are connected to the expansive, ever growing and flowing universe. And that money is, in fact, a frequency. And we're connected to that frequency. We are abundant, benevolent beings. We have abundance in the energy inside of our bodies. We have abundance in cells. We have abundance in air. We have abundance in opportunity. And then we're all of a sudden, significantly as a culture, limited in income. What if today you could identify what has been holding you back from receiving more love, more money, more opportunity, and more freedom? I've said this 1,000 times, that your income and the amount of money that is in your bank account is a direct reflection of your belief in your worthiness to have money. Money is not the problem. Your relationship with money is. And it is your relationship, meaning specifically how you feel about money, that is dictating how much money you currently have. You see, most people don't actually have an income problem per se. They think they do. Most of them, as I had alluded to, hire me because they say, oh, I want to make more money. They don't have an income problem. They have an identity and or nervous system problem around receiving more money. And so we have to ask ourselves, if we are limited by income based on how we identify as a being who is open to receiving the abundance and the benevolence of the universe or the lack thereof, or if our nervous system is taxed in a way that has these limiting beliefs that hold us back around how we think or feel around money, that is going to heavily dictate everything around the topic of money, which is going to then directly impact what we're going to experience around money. I had said to you that the InPowered Life podcast is designed to be a mirror reflecting back to you who you are, what's happening internally, so that you have awareness. And when you have awareness, you can create a shift. Well, money is a mirror for you, and it is the most accurate reflection of self-worth, safety, power, trust, and ultimately, what we're going to talk about today, your capacity. It is going to show you what is your capacity. When I looked at the amount of money that I have, assets, investments, properties, etc., that number showed me what is my current capacity. And I want to expand my capacity. I'm constantly in a state of expanding my capacity. About 2 years ago, I did a podcast episode where Aniston and I challenged our income revenue ceilings. I had identified I'd only ever earned up to a certain amount of money. I had said to her after filing taxes, oh my gosh, but I realized I've made the same amount of money for the last few years, regardless of what I've been doing. That tells me that I think I'm only worth that amount of money. I did some inner work and my income tripled, literally tripled that year. And I'm like, nothing I'd ever done before that was able to give me that same level of growth. But then I plateaued again, because you see, every time we come up against a new revenue ceiling, in other words, we're coming up against a new limiting belief, we're coming up against a new capacity block that is preventing us from receiving the abundance, the benevolence that is around us. I liken this to air. And I say this to rooms all the time when speaking about sales, revenue, and the energetics of making money. If you were told tomorrow that you only have a certain amount of breaths to breathe, you would start to count your breaths. You would get worried. Your thoughts around the air that you have would shift. And it would become this thing that all of a sudden was focused on scarcity. You would take that deep breath and you would go, oh my gosh, one less, another one. You'd go for a run and you would say, oh, I should probably stop running because I'm burning through air faster. And so you would start to slow down your breathing rate. And now you would start to look at what you have. And money works the same way. We have been disillusioned through our upbringing, through our environments, to believe that, well, money is lack. And that's usually represented through our childhood. We inherit the majority of our belief systems around money. And today's going to be an opportunity for you to really ask yourself, what was the conversation around money in your life, in your home, in your upbringing? What is it that you still feel today? Because I'm going to tell you now that most people are programmed, and I'm going to say they've inherited these programs, but they have been programmed through three main categories as it relates to their belief around money. And these are the three things that I would say 98% of people, if we look at the stats I was reading out to you earlier, where less than 0.22% make over $1 million. And that's now the benchmark for being able to at least meet your expenses, to have a comfortable home, to be able to provide for retirement. And yet so few people are in that bracket. So here are the three things that the majority of people have inherited that seem to hold them back. And that is scarcity, where we believe that, well, there isn't enough money to go around. And if I have money, what if I'm going to lose it? And, well, I need to hold on to the little money that I do have. And so the moment you are holding on to the money that you have, or the moment that you think, oh, I couldn't have that because there isn't enough, or the moment you're trying to plan or to budget around something and you realize that you don't make enough, that is affirming and reaffirming and validating that money is in fact scarce. The second biggest trigger is shame. I'm going to tell you now, I have a tremendous amount of shame around income. And we're going to talk about this in a few moments' time. And I'm going to support you in being able to identify which one of these three is within your programming, if not all three of these. For me, shame around money really came from feeling shameful that growing up, I didn't have as much money as some of the people around me. And then when I started to make money, I felt shameful that I had money and some other people didn't have money. And then that shame really compounded when I started making more money than I needed in the moment. But as in anybody, when you start to make money, you're trying to set yourself up, you want to buy a house, you're creating a savings plan, you're putting money into investments. And then I had shame that I had excess money, but I had family members that say didn't. And now I had something they didn't have, which made me feel shameful that I had. The shame then was doubled because I then had shame that I wasn't sharing it. And I wasn't sharing the money with them because, as I had said, I was trying to save to buy a house. And I knew I needed to have a deposit. And I knew I needed to have these nice things. And so I started to feel the guilt and the shame. In the previous episode, I actually spoke into the frequencies of all the different emotions. And guilt and shame are the two lowest vibrational frequencies that we have on the planet. And when we think about expressing shame and guilt around something like money, which is a profound part of all of the human experience, that's pretty telling. And that guilt and that shame perpetuated further guilt and shame. Not only did I carry shame about now having money, not sharing the money, I then felt guilt that I wasn't taking care of everybody else's problems. And so my biggest shame trigger came from actually giving all my money away, self-sabotaging, buying businesses, buying homes, cars, paying for things, paying salaries, supporting people, because every time I realized I had more than somebody else had, the overwhelming shame and guilt made me overcompensate and pay. The third trigger is separation. Separation, that money is out there, the thing you want is out there, but you're stuck over here. That feeling like money is an external force, like as in this tangible, tactical, 3D paper that somebody else prints, somebody else controls, and you get your stipend. You work a certain number of hours and you get a certain amount for it. I grew up in a beautiful, beautiful part of South Africa, but there was a lot of money in my hometown. And then there were a lot of people that were wealthy, and then there were a lot of people that were not wealthy. So you got to see both sides of the spectrum in such a small, beautiful coastal town. I went to a high school where there was tremendous wealth in the kids that I went to school with. And so I had the evidence of what did it look like for money to be over there. And by looking at their lives, their homes, their fridges, their cars, their wardrobes, and then comparing to what my life looked like, my life wasn't bad, but if we were comparing, there was a profound disconnect between what the quality was that I was living from a financial perspective versus the quality of what their lives looked like. And that made me further emphasize the separation. Separation that Rudi isn't good enough, and what Rudi wants is over there. And only if Rudi's going to get what's over there is Rudi going to be worthy. And so, as I had said to you, third time now, today's episode is about you. It is about you and your relationship to money. I want you to be very present to how much money is in your bank account, how much money you make. And then I want you to ask yourself, what kind of life would you like to live from today moving forward? And if you could, which I remind you, you can, could you rewrite your inherited programming to instead decide what do you want as your underlining fundamental core belief around money? And so I want to give you an exercise. Aniston came to me literally yesterday, and she said to me, oh my gosh, I just did this incredible exercise that I heard about, and I wrote out 3 pages. It was pretty profound, and just chatted through some of the takeaways that she had. And I sat there thinking, wow, that really sounded incredible. And so I had set a date with myself to do the same exercise at 6 a.m. the following morning. And I sat down this morning, 6 a.m., pen, paper, my journal. I had already meditated, and I sat there with a fresh cup of coffee, and I then quietened my mind, and I just started to do this exercise. Allowed the thoughts to come in, allowed myself to feel, and then as I was feeling into it, I then started making notes. And I've just kept writing and writing and writing and writing, and line after line after line. And it was so surprising to me what came out of me, the thoughts, the memories, the statements, the affirming beliefs. And I'm talking about the underlining belief around what I believed I was worthy of, and how I truly felt around money and the conversation around money. And I've done so much work on this subject, but this was probably one of the most profound exercises, so much so that I decided this gets to be a podcast episode, and it gets to be a podcast episode today. So here's the exercise. I want you to go and find a quiet space in your home. You heard me say it a moment ago. Set a date with your higher consciousness. You're going to say to your higher self, I'm going to set aside time to uncover my inner dialogue, the limitations, the restrictions, the things that are holding me back from living this abundant, benevolent life that I came here to live. And I want you to show me, drop it into my mind, into my awareness, into my thoughts, my feelings, my memories, allow them to just bubble up so I can be an observer to them and not physically live the feelings again, not being in the emotion, but having the awareness to the emotion. And then meet that like it is the most important meeting that you have, because it is. The quality of the rest of your life and your income for the rest of your life depends on this exercise. And so if you set a time for 6 o'clock, be on time, be ready, be prepared. Sit down, quieten your mind, and then ask your higher self to show you what you most need to learn today, what you are ready to release, what you are ready to let go of. And then don't judge the process. Just allow it to unfold. Taking a really deep breath into your belly, hold your breath for the count of 4, and then breathe out slowly for the count of 7. Repeat if you feel like you need it. When you're in a state of just being calm and relaxed, then I want you to write out any memories, any thoughts, any statements, or any beliefs that you have around money. What is the shame you carry? What scarcity beliefs do you have? What separation stories and or evidence come up for you? I will tell you, before doing this exercise, and I mean, I filled 2 pages. Before doing this exercise, I thought I had really done a tremendous amount of work as it related to money. And then in doing the exercise, the first things that came up were things I had awareness to, like, oh, we didn't grow up with much money. I saw other people had money. And then it just started to go deeper and deeper. And I went past the surface level into the shame. Now, I had mentioned to you the layers of shame that I carried around income. Shame that if I have more than I need, well, then that becomes bad. And that if I have and somebody else doesn't have, well, then I'm bad for having more and I have to hide it. And then I'm going to feel shameful that I'm hiding it. So then I'm going to give it away so I don't feel guilty. And that is a self-sabotaging mechanism that has 100% held me back from achieving my potential. And so if you were going to do this exercise and you identified, what did your parents say to you around money? What was your belief around money? How did it show up in your life? Would you date money? Do you like money? Do you want more money? When somebody talks about money, do you get tight? Are you the person at a dinner party when someone says, gosh, how much money do you make a year? Do you shut down and you say, like, that is inappropriate. We shouldn't be talking about money? Or is it a topic you don't really care about, meaning you are neutral? It's like, oh, money is just a tool. It's a thing. Yes, I use it to create more impact, to give myself opportunities to go on vacation, to have more fun, to more joy. Or do I have a negative association around that topic? Because all of that is simply feedback back to you that is speaking into the relationship. And do this exercise where you have at least an hour to pour into it and write out anything that comes up for you. I had filled an entire page. I had thought I had run out of things to say. And then I took a really deep breath in again. I held my breath for the count of 4. I released it really slowly for the count of 7. And then all of a sudden, that was when more and more and more came up. And that was around shame. When I finished the exercise of identifying what was the belief that I carried around money, this is the unconscious underlying pattern behavior that we use to self-sabotage. I had a conversation with a gentleman that I want to share, and I have to be vague. They were given an opportunity to buy into a business that would yield them tremendous potential. And it is aligned for them based on what they know, who they are, their skill set, and then the market and the opportunity. But they are going through a money mindset trap. And so when the opportunity came around the very first time, they self-sabotaged. They actually prevented this deal from going through while they were speaking, oh, I want that. Oh, that feels aligned. That would be a good opportunity. But then all the actions that came up afterwards actually prevented them from taking the necessary steps to move into this business venture. And that is such a clear example of where we have a belief that when we have more money, that that's going to cost us something. Because I wasn't emotionally attached to the clients, to the business, to their income, it was easy for me to identify. And in conversation, I just said, what is your belief around money? What is your belief around whether this works? What if you made more? And they immediately started to talk about the money belief that they have in their current business and how much money they make and what they feel around their income, and their family back home does not have the same level of income. And if they went into this business venture and this business venture doubled their income, well, that would essentially double how they were feeling around their money situation. And when they identified that, I said, let me ask you a question. If we doubled your income right now, would that really be bad? No. Could you create greater impact? Yes. Could you, without guilt or shame, help your family more? Well, yeah. And so they then moved forward with their business opportunity. We self-sabotage and procrastinate and do things constantly to prevent ourselves from connecting to the divinity that already is around us. Because for most of us, we don't believe that we are worthy. I talk about worthiness at the foundation of almost everything in transformation, because the quality of your relationship is equal to your worthiness for the relationship. The quality of your bank account is equal to your worthiness in the bank account. I started today by really talking about how money isn't the problem. It's your relationship with the problem. And that the amount of money that you make, the job you have, the business you've started, the market, the president, et cetera, is not the problem why you don't make more money. It's your identity with money. What is your way of thinking, feeling, and being around money and your worthiness to have it? And then how does your nervous system react or respond to, and I need you to hear me, receiving money? Your job is just to be open to receive, and to be worthy to receive. I want to end today's episode by reminding you the amount of money in your bank account is just an indicator that that is how much money you right now, through identity and your nervous system, are capable of receiving. That is what you are currently capable of receiving. And so your work is to expand your capacity to receive. When you've written out your entire list of everything that has created the program of your belief around money, you then have to turn the page and write out your new belief system. I believe that money is just energy. I believe that energy is unlimited. I believe that I am divine. I believe that the divinity that is me is, at its core, naturally abundance. And so I'm an abundant, benevolent being. Money comes to me quickly and easily. I make money effortlessly. Money is working with me to create greater impact. It is safe to have money. It is safe to give money away because there is always more. Money isn't a thing I need to hoard. Money is a thing that I allow to receive. I am constantly, every day, in every way, with every breath in, expanding my capacity to receive more abundance. Money is joy. Money is freedom. Money is good. Money is healthy. Rewrite your belief around money, and this will shift your identity. And then every day you have to look at your nervous system for how are you reacting and responding around money. If you were to see something in your home and you would think, oh, we only save that for special occasions. Oh, that is something that is reserved for this day or this time, or we use this sparingly. That's just your nervous system showing you still believe in lack, separation, or scarcity. And you're going to get the feedback. Your job is to stay present to that feedback. I told you today's episode was going to be triggering because you fall somewhere on that spectrum. Are you making over $1 million? Are you the 0.77% that makes over 500,000? Or do you fit into the 85+% people that make under $150,000 a year? I've made $20,000, $30,000 a year. I've made $100,000 a year. I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I've been in absolute abundance. And I can tell you the difference between living in abundance and living in lack is a choice. And it's a choice that you get to make. And it's really always grounded in your willingness to believe in your worthiness. And I'm going to tell you now, you are worthy. I love you so much. I'm proud of you for listening to this episode. I want to hear from you. So send me a message. What was the most striking bit of information that you received today? And then when you do the exercise, what were you not expecting? And send it to me in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me on the InPowered Life Podcast. Go and do this date with yourself. You're worthy of it. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, I love you and goodbye. If this episode gave you clarity, peace, or a perspective shift, hold on to that. And here is how you lock it in. Subscribe so that you keep building momentum week after week. And if you're the kind of person that believes a good message should travel, please leave a review. Reviews aren't just ratings. They're signals that help this reach the people who are ready for it. And then share this episode with somebody you love, someone you lead, or somebody that you were rooting for. Links are in the show notes so that you can connect with me online and on Instagram. Now go out there and take one beautiful, bold, and aligned step and make it count. I'm going to catch you on the next episode of the InPowered Life Podcast.